Our next speaker is also from the class of 2006. Driven by her passion to help others, she holds a position as an EMT at Chalk Children's Trauma Center. And I just heard some exciting news. She just got into UCLA last night. So another Bruin like me, unlike that other school across the street. So I give a warm welcome to Roseanne.
Thank you for that sweet introduction. Assalamu alaikum, dear family and friends. I'm so humbled to be standing before you tonight on a stage that I once glorified as a young child. I'm even more honored to be introducing to you our keynote speaker, one of my childhood friends, who is now an inspiration to us all, especially myself as I follow in her footsteps, beginning my own career in medicine. As young children, Soraya and I would sit in the corners of the front office at New Horizon early in the morning and eat breakfast and just talk. It was calm and peaceful, as we were always there before the sunrise with our parents. And it allowed us to catch up on each other's lives. It was these conversations with her that I realized just how passionate she was about pretty much anything. She spoke with poise and insightfulness about a variety of different subjects. That made me quickly realize, right then and there, that this girl sitting before me was going to be something special. If we fast forward to 10 years later, Soraya continues to be an inspiration to not just me, but so many others whom lives she has touched along the way. As an advocate for humanity, she received the 2012 to 2013 Dalai Lama Scholarship, an international fellowship dedicated to inspiring ethical leadership and social innovation, which led her to currently pursuing a medical degree at Harvard Medical School. I knew she was bound for Harvard Medical School many years ago, as she was at the New Horizon Science Fair, which we have a picture of. Just not sure. There it is. As you can see, the IV bags in the back, starting early. It is clear that Soraya is not just academically intelligent, but her work with refugees in Jordan and the way she spoke about the Iraq War when we were children also makes it clear that her warm heart and compassion, in combination with her academic intelligence, is bound to lead her to great places. I think Hillary Clinton needs to watch out, as we all may be sitting in the room with the future female president. I hope you all will join me in welcoming to the stage my friend, a future president, a leader in the community, and a true inspiration to what we all can become, Soraya Azzawi.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Before we get started, can I get the clicker, please, for the PowerPoint? Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Soraya Azzawi, and I'm an alumna of the New Horizon Irvine Elementary School class of 2003. It's an honor to be with you here tonight. So I've been debating how to start this talk for a while, and eventually I decided on a personal experience that really served as a pivotal wake-up call for me. And it's an experience that I actually haven't shared with anyone outside of my immediate family. So it takes place in high school, like all great stories do. It was in the beginning of the year in geometry class, and we were introducing ourselves to one another and just really starting to get to know one another. And one student was really interested in what my background is, and repeatedly insisting that I was American had failed to satiate his curiosity. So eventually I tell him that I'm Iraqi American, and he turns to me in all seriousness and says, "So are you a terrorist?" As if it's somehow part and parcel of being Middle Eastern. And his voice wasn't particularly loud, but in a small class his words carried. And I have to confess, the accusation hurt. So of course, being Iraqi, I have to say something sassy back. So I tell him that his being ignorant doesn't mean that everyone from his background is. And so he tries to pass it off as a joke, and the classroom slowly returns to its normal rhythm. And while I can't tell you how many of my classmates remember that exchange, what I can tell you is that his words stayed with me long after I left geometry that day. Let's see if I can get this right. This is part of the presentation, I swear. There we go. So there's a certain power in seeing yourself represented, and this is largely the image of Islam and Muslim Americans that the post-9/11 generation grew up with. The fear sparked by 9/11 has mutated the general perception of America's Islamic and Middle Eastern populations. And I'm not sure if you can read some of those words, but they say things like fanatic, militant, radical. And young Muslim Americans are struggling to reconcile these grotesque bylines with their understanding of their faith and their place in the fabric of American society. And when you're constantly bombarded with negative stereotypes and derogatory epithets, it's very challenging for our youth not to forfeit some sense of worth in their identities as Muslim Americans. So these results are taken from a study conducted by the Public Religion Research Institute. And the results are divided by the news source that study participants rely on the most heavily. So the red column, for example, represents Fox News, and across the board we can see that individuals who trust Fox News the most heavily tended to have extremely negative or misguided notions about Islam and Muslim Americans, including things like Islamic values are somehow at odds with American values, and I personally think that nothing could be further from the truth. And this is particularly alarming because public opinion will shape how people vote and how policymakers decide on issues. So accurate representation is absolutely critical. So now that I've given you some context, I'd like to give a brief overview of this presentation, and I wanted to touch on the factors that led to my enrollment in New Horizon, as well as how New Horizon's legacy has influenced the path I chose today. Let's see if I can do this. Okay. There we go. So my family laid the foundations for me to begin exploring the connections to my heritage. My mother in particular instilled a very robust pride in my community, and these pictures are all from all the way back in the 90s. This was at the World Fair at my elementary school. And it was thanks to my mother's initiative that this was actually the first year Iraq had a place at the World Fair. And at that age, I was just excited to walk around in a costume. But even at that young age, I began to have a sense of awareness of how meaningful it was to be represented. And so in addition to recognizing and learning about my own heritage, it was very important to my family that I develop an appreciation and respect for diverse religious and cultural traditions. So when I was younger, my mother would take me traveling with her around the world as she studied different architectural styles, and it was really an educational experience unlike any other. So another influence on my outlook during my childhood was sports. It was a great opportunity to not only stay physically healthy, but also to develop skills like teamwork, discipline, and dedication. But for my parents, this begs the question, if we can find the time for activities like sports and traveling and horseback riding, shouldn't we be able to find the time to learn about our faith tradition as well? So enter New Horizon. This is from our graduating picture in 2003. And when my parents first enrolled me in New Horizon, I expected a standardized curriculum of Quranic and Islamic studies, which there was, but it was far more multifaceted than that. And I never really anticipated how deeply invested the education would be in things like personal development and leadership. And one of my most profound memories of New Horizon was actually from a field trip we took to a bowling alley. And so we were a bunch of kids filing onto the bus, and so the only volumes we came in were loud and louder. And Dr. Izzuddin was telling us to be on our best behavior, but then he said something that truly left an impact on me. And that is, when people look at you, they not only see you, but they're seeing your community through you. So needless to say, it was a very intense trip to the bowling alley. But he was right in the sense that when people look at you, your actions are going to shape how they view you and those associated with you. And I didn't realize it at the time, but the year I spent at New Horizon formed a foundation for a much more consolidated Muslim American identity. It gave my faith context, and it taught me about how things like social justice and global awareness play very key roles in the Islamic tradition. So, for example, one of my favorite parts of New Horizon was a lot of the community service we did. And when the 2004 Boxing Day tsunami struck Sri Lanka, we were actively contributing to relief efforts by fundraising through selling multicolored wristbands. Another thing we did would be frequent homeless feedings. And what these dimensions outside of the classroom did, is really teach me about how to appreciate Islamic teachings. We weren't simply passively absorbing Islamic trivia from textbooks, but we were actively engaging with the faith. So building off the legacy that New Horizon constructed, I became very interested in refugee relief work. And I was first introduced to the concept of war trauma and refugees through No More Victims, which is an American nonprofit organization dedicated to bringing war-injured children to the United States for medical treatment. And at the time, my family was actually hosting some of these children, and I was particularly close to Ala. She was a 3-year-old girl who suffered major retinal and abdominal injuries, due to a recent tank round during the military campaign in Iraq. And the memory of Ala stayed with me long after I left the hospital that day. And as invigorating as that grassroots activism was, I learned that I really wanted to become a physician that day because I would be able to impact the children in a much more tangible manner. So this desire to become a physician competed with my passion for human rights work. And during high school, I had the opportunity to serve as a U.S. student ambassador to Australia. And it was a really incredible experience in cultural immersion. We actually herded cattle on an Australian ranch. We had the opportunity to see the Great Barrier Reef. We actually had the opportunity to talk to Aborigines tribes and learn a bit about their history. And this really sparked my interest in cross-cultural collaboration and the international policies that shape it. So when I got to college, all the academic counselors got to know me really well because I changed my major about a dozen times. And so I was really attracted to medicine because of its unparalleled capacity to alleviate suffering. But at the same time, this competed with my passion for public policy and human rights. So fascinated by both subjects, I decided to pursue dual degrees in neurobiology and political science, and I found a compelling connection between these interests through global health. Global conscientiousness was central to my efforts as the 2012-2013 Dalai Lama Scholar. And so what this is a program that conceptualizes a model of leadership that incorporates things like a commitment to ethics, public service, and positive global relations. And so for my project, I proposed something twofold. I wanted to have a human rights journal that would expose issues of human rights often far removed from the public consciousness. And the second part of the proposal was a university-wide refugee mentoring program. So the first part, as I said, was an entirely student-run publication, and its vision was using journalism as a platform for activism to raise awareness about some of the lesser-known human rights crises on campus. And the second part of the project, and my personal favorite, was Fresh Start at UC Irvine, a refugee mentoring program. And the Dalai Lama Scholarship really challenged my notions of leadership, because oftentimes when you identify an area of critical need, you wonder how you can make an impact. And with respect to Fresh Start, the numbers of the refugee crisis were staggering. And that was compacted by the economic climate at the time because a lot of our potential nonprofit partner organizations had either cut back their services for refugees or eliminated them entirely. And so we kept looking around, and eventually word got out that we were looking for a partner organization. And I had the fortune of meeting Maimouna Hussein Katan, who's in the middle in that photo over there. And she's the founder of the TIA Foundation, which has years of experience working with families of refugees and with refugees themselves. And that basically gave us the legwork we needed to launch our own project. And so with her help and the help of our other community partner, the Center for Living Peace, Fresh Start soared far beyond what its initial conception was, and it became a multifaceted program that was really sustained by student activism. And I'm very happy to say that it's actually still in place in UC Irvine today. And there's different dimensions through which student volunteers can contribute. There's English tutoring sessions, Art Speaks Art Therapy, and the Youth Soccer Program. Come on. And perhaps one of the most exciting aspects of Fresh Start was the idea that we really made this an issue that the entire campus could get behind and care about. And this is a picture from our Refugee Awareness Banquet, which managed to attract around 130 attendees. And this really cemented the idea in my mind that where there's a will, there's a way. Because when this started a year ago, we hadn't conceived any of this. We were thinking of a small room, maybe a couple of tutors. But over the past couple of years, it's really expanded into a major movement at UC Irvine. And so I really enjoyed managing the refugee mentoring program for a year, and this was about the time that I found out about the Fulbright program. So this program was established in the aftermath of World War II in the hopes that intercultural exchange would promote a more effective diplomacy by building empathy between people of different backgrounds. So students from the United States would go and study abroad in another country, and students from that country would also come and study here, benefiting both peoples. And so as a neurobiology and political science double major, I decided to apply with a project that examines the psychosocial health conditions of refugees in Amman. Let's go. So a little bit about war and psychological trauma. Forced displacement combined with the violence often experienced during a military conflict can lead to an increased risk of psychological trauma. And so refugees, who are often already in poor communities, are also at risks for a myriad of mental health ailments, including post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. So what our project did, if I can get this to work, is that we collaborated with the Jordanian Ministry of Health, the National Center of Mental Health, and the World Health Organization to look at levels of PTSD and depression in urban refugees in Amman. And because of the recent crisis in Syria, predominantly our population was of Syrian refugees, although we also catered to Palestinian and Iraqi refugees. The experience in Jordan was also a deeply personal one for me, because it was the first time that I had the opportunity to live in a country where Islam was really part of the mainstream culture. And you could celebrate Eid al-Adha as a major holiday and hear the adhan before dusk. And it was actually an experience that I got to share with a friend of mine from college. And you can see her on the bottom left. She's not Middle Eastern. She doesn't really have anything to do with the Middle East. And for her, it was a very cathartic experience because it contrasted so starkly with the image of Islam and Muslims that she's used to seeing. And of course, the food was excellent, which is the most important part of the trip. So currently, I'm a student at Harvard Medical School. I've been there for about a year, and I'm very delighted to say that Boston broke the snow record. And while I'm not sure what specialty I want to go into, I'm hoping it's going to be within the realm of refugee health and global health. So I started this presentation with a story, and I thought it appropriate that I end with one as well. I'm sure the vast majority of us know who these three are. These three are Muslim students who were killed at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And while this impacted students of all backgrounds, it was particularly disconcerting for young Muslim Americans. And so at Harvard, the various Muslim student groups, there's one for the undergrad campus, one for the law school, one for the business school, we were all deliberating over how to respond. And we were considering publishing an article in the student newspaper, but we weren't sure. And then someone said, you know, I don't think we should do this. I don't think it's a good idea. We should probably lay low and distance ourselves from it. What's one article going to do? And I'm very relieved to say that at the end of the day, we decided to go through and publish it. Because that one article by itself started a conversation on our campus about what this incident really means. Because now more than ever, it's important for we as the Islamic community to take ownership of our narrative instead of leaving it for other people to interpret. And so I'd like to end with a quote by Jalal ad-Din Rumi. Why do you stay in prison when the door is so wide open? Move outside the cage of fear thinking. Live in silence. And a few quick shout outs. I'd like to thank my parents for their unconditional love and support. Sayyid Mustafa al-Qazwini. Sayyid Mustafa al-Qazwini and the late Dr. Maher Hajhout for being incredible mentors. And of course, Dr. Dina al-Elchari for her immense help throughout this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Soraya. Thank you for that inspirational talk.